The morning light spread slowly across the northern ridges of the West Bank, touching the scarred landscape of Bayt Lid. The air is still heavy with the smell of smoke and burnt rubber. On the outskirts of the Bedouin village, silence is interrupted only by the crunch of gravel under cautious footsteps, people returning to see what is left after a night that many describe as one of the most violent they have ever witnessed. Charred trucks stand like blackened skeletons against the pale hills. The metal is twisted and brittle, their frames collapsed inward from heat. Families gather around them in disbelief, pointing out where their animals were kept, where the food for the winter had been stored, and where, only a day ago, life was still normal. This is the aftermath of an attack by Israeli settlers, a wave of destruction that swept through the northern West Bank, targeting homes, farms, and warehouses. The local residents say the assault was sudden and overwhelming. One man walks among the debris, shaking his head as he bends to pick up a half-burnt piece of plastic. All that remains of what used to be a feed container nearby. Isa Dais, a Bedouin resident, looks at what used to be his livelihood. His words are calm but cut through the air like steel. The settlers attacked us. They set the truck on fire, then this car, then the hay and the food supply warehouse. They opened the barns and let the cattle out. Behind him, the camera captures the evidence. Barns with open gates, feed scattered on the ground, and the faint sound of frightened animals in the distance. For Isa and his neighbours, the destruction is not just material, it is personal, generational. Their herds and harvests are the centre of their existence. Losing them means losing the rhythm of daily life that has held this community together for decades. A few metres away stands Hassan Dais, his face streaked with dust. He was the owner of one of the burnt trucks now reduced to ashes. He raises his hand toward the hills from where the attackers came and recalls the chaos that unfolded. We were attacked by 200 settlers. This street was full of settlers. They came walking from the hills, from Bayt Lid. The army was stationed here, near these cars. 7 military vehicles. While the army were here, the settlers came and threw a bomb which exploded. His description paints a chilling picture. Settlers advancing in coordinated groups, while Israeli military vehicles reportedly stood nearby. His truck, once used to transport supplies between nearby towns, is now a heap of blackened metal. As the camera pans, the scene widens to show a line of vehicles burned to their frames. Smoke still curls faintly from one of them, and the ground is covered in ashes and fragments of melted tyres. Across the village, another site bears witness to the night's violence, the Junidi Dairy Factory, a family-run business that served dozens of communities across the northern West Bank here. The damage tells of planning and precision. Amjad Amr, the factory manager, recounts what happened with a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. Other than beating sticks, they were also carrying cocktail Molotov in bags. They had organised everything over how they would operate and how they would set the fire on. One would open, the other would throw the fuel on the car. One would turn the fire on other than those who were breaking the glass in the warehouse. They tried to enter the interior hall of the warehouse. We closed the doors and were clashing with them from inside. Amr's testimony underscores what many here describe as an orchestrated attack, not a spontaneous riot. The attackers, he says, moved with military-like coordination, equipped with weapons, fuel and pre-planned targets. Footage from the scene shows trucks still smouldering in the factory yard, their sides warped and paint peeled by heat inside. Stacks of dairy products have melted into unrecognisable lumps, a reminder of the livelihoods destroyed overnight. Within hours of the assault, word of the attack spread across the West Bank, sparking condemnation and calls for accountability. Israeli police later confirmed that several settlers had been arrested in connection with the incident, but no details were given on the scale of the operation or whether all involved had been detained. For the residents, the arrests offer little comfort. The pattern of violence, attacks on farms, torching of vehicles and intimidation of rural Palestinian communities has been rising steadily through 2025 rights groups report that settler assaults in the occupied territories have nearly doubled compared to the previous year, often carried out under the watch of the Israeli army or during its operations. By late afternoon, a delegation from the Palestinian Ministry of Economy and Industry arrives to inspect the damage. The officials walk carefully through the wreckage, cameras following their steps. One of them, Arafat Asfour, the Palestinian Minister of Industry, stops to address the crowd and the press. His voice carries a mix of frustration and defiance. The action was systematic to make life in this area difficult. a message to Palestinians that it is difficult for them to live here. Our counter-message is, just like what we did with harvesting olive trees, clashes, and in other cases, we shall stay here. We will rebuild and will carry on despite the settlers and the occupation. His words reflect a sentiment that runs deep in the community. The determination to stay on the land despite repeated violence and economic pressure. The Palestinian government has promised to provide assistance for reconstruction, but the logistics remain complicated in areas under Israeli control. As night falls again over Bayt Lid, the outlines of the burnt vehicles fade into the darkness. A few solar lights flicker to life near the houses that still stand. Families gather to recount the events, their stories overlapping, who saw what, who lost animals, who was hurt. There is grief, but also a quiet resolve. Throughout the next day, neighbours from surrounding villages begin arriving with supplies, buckets, tools, food and clean water. The small acts of solidarity remind everyone that the attack, though devastating, has not succeeded in driving them away. Reporters visiting the site document the evidence meticulously, the burn patterns, the debris of Molotov cocktails, the footprints in the ash, the shattered glass scattered across the yard. Some residents hold up fragments of unexploded canisters as proof of what was thrown at them. In the background, Israeli officials release a short statement saying that security forces arrested several settlers following incidents of violence in the north of the West Bank. They add that investigations are ongoing. No further comment is given about the alleged presence of army vehicles during the attack. For Palestinians in Bayt Lid, the official statement feels distant. Their reality is visible in every burnt truck, every ruined warehouse. They say these attacks are not isolated, but part of a wider pattern of intimidation designed to clear rural lands and expand settlement zones deeper into Palestinian areas. Local NGOs and international monitors have echoed the same concerns. Data collected by humanitarian agencies show that the frequency and intensity of settler violence in the northern West Bank has risen sharply since mid-2024, often targeting agricultural livelihoods, olive groves, livestock pens and food storage facilities. Standing amid the ruins, Issa Dais repeats what many others here say quietly, that even if the damage can be repaired, the fear is harder to erase. Children wake at night to the sound of vehicles on the road, wondering if the attackers will return. Farmers hesitate to venture far from their homes. The Junaidi factory, once a major supplier of dairy to schools and markets across the region, now sits silent. Its yard, once bustling with delivery trucks, is a graveyard of burnt machinery. Workers sweep the ashes, separating what can be salvaged from what must be thrown away. Inside the administrative office, Amjad Amr and his team take inventory of losses. The fire consumed thousands of cartons of milk and yogurt, storage coolers and delivery vehicles. He says the factory's priority now is to restart production as soon as possible, not just to save jobs, but to send a message that they will not be forced to shut down. By the third day, aid organisations arrive to assess humanitarian needs. Water tanks have been destroyed, animal feed lost, and several families displaced after their shelters burned down. Emergency crews help clear debris and rebuild temporary barns. In Ramallah, the Palestinian Authority issues a statement calling on the international community to intervene and ensure accountability. The message refers to the attack as part of a dangerous escalation in settler violence and urges protection for Palestinian civilians living in rural areas. Meanwhile, Israeli civil rights groups have condemned the assault as well, warning that impunity for violent settlers threatens both Palestinians and the rule of law in Israel itself. Their statement reads that no democratic society can tolerate such organised acts of terror carried out under the cover of military presence. For the Bedouin families of Bayt Lid, the political language offers little relief. What they want, they say, is security, to be able to sleep without fear, to farm without the threat of flames at night. Issa Dais walks once more through his destroyed barn. He points to the remains of hay that had been stacked for the winter and says, almost to himself, that each bale represented days of work under the sun. We rebuild and they burn again, he says quietly. Then he shrugs, picks up a shovel and starts clearing the ash. The resilience is unmistakable. It is seen in the women who return to clean the soot-covered walls, in the children helping gather scattered tools, in the men rebuilding animal pens from salvaged wood and tin life. For them is an act of resistance. Through the following week, crews of volunteers from nearby cities arrived to help repair water lines and deliver new feed. The Palestinian Ministry of Industry coordinates support with local businesses to restore production at the Junidi dairy factory. Minister Arafat Asfour returns to oversee progress, telling journalists that recovery efforts are underway and that industrial perseverance is part of our national resilience. In interviews, he stresses that rebuilding factories and farms is more than economic recovery. It is a statement of continuity on Palestinian land. By the 10th day, small signs of normalcy begin to return. A new water tank is installed where the old one was destroyed. Children carry buckets of water from trucks to help their families wash away the black soot. Still, the scars are everywhere. Black streaks on concrete walls, melted wires hanging from poles, scorched earth where grass will take months to grow back. International journalists who visit the area note that these scenes mirror dozens of others across the West Bank in recent months. From Nablus to Hebron, from Qalqilia to the Jordan Valley, attacks by armed settlers have left similar marks: burnt fields, smashed windows, frightened communities. Back in Bayt Lid, the community begins to organise a local watch group. At night, men take turns patrolling the roads, armed only with flashlights and phones. They say they are not looking for confrontation, but for warning, to alert families early if settlers approach again. In the final minutes of the documentary, the camera returns to the village from above. The hills that were once cloaked in smoke now stand quiet under the evening sun. The burnt trucks, still in place, have become symbols, reminders of destruction, but also of survival. A narrator's closing line summarises the story of Bayt Lid, a community burned but unbroken, an economy damaged but determined, a people whose endurance has become their loudest form of protest. And as Arafat Asfour's words echo once more, we will rebuild and will carry on despite the settlers and the occupation. The scene fades to black, leaving the sound of hammering in the distance, the unmistakable rhythm of rebuilding life from ashes.